Goth is a subculture that's been misunderstood pretty much since the beginning of its existence. There's always been assumptions and stereotypes made by people that just aren't sure what to think about it. A lot of these can be pretty harmful or incredibly inaccurate. So I kind of wanted to talk about some of those. Some of those stereotypes being, that like goths are depressed, goths have to look a certain way, maybe that like goths do drugs or are really promiscuous, things like that. Goths are just like any other person where, it can really vary depending on the individual. Maybe some goths do drugs or are promiscuous or look a certain way, but that shouldn't be the standard that goths are held to. Because like me, for example, I've had a lot of people that just see what I look like, or they see that I drive a hearse or some of my interests, and they automatically assume that I must be obsessed with death or that I'm depressed, and that's the furthest from the truth. I'm a really upbeat and generally optimistic person, and I know that there are many other goths that are also generally pretty happy, You don't have to be depressed to be goth. That has no correlation whatsoever. There are goths who are depressed, but it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they are goth. And same with having to wear black. Not all goths have to wear black or do crazy makeup or hair. I choose to do that. I kind of fall into the stereotype with what I look like, but that isn't what all goths have to look like or do look like. There are many goths that are very colorful, and that's been something that's been around since the beginning of the scene. In the 80s, a lot of the staple goth bands that influenced what goth looks like today did wear a lot of color. If you look at what Robert Smith dressed like and Susie Sue dressed like, you'll see that there are a lot of colors. They didn't just wear all black all the time. And it's not just them. You can find lots of pictures of people like Peter Murphy from Bauhaus that is dressed quite colorful, or even Andrew Eldridge. Or, in the, I think some good references to look at for that would be if you look at the Susie Sue Spellbound video. She is wearing a lot of yellow. She's got some colorful makeup on. She'll wear red lipstick. Pretty colorful. Or the Sisters of Mercy Dominion music video, I believe. Patricia Morrison and Andrew Eldritch are clad in all white. They're not wearing black. So I think that one's really dumb, is that you have to look a certain way. There are a lot of people that are more casual goths. They just enjoy the music and other aspects of the subculture. One that's pretty annoying is the assumption that goths are Satanists or Wiccans or things like that, and that's not always accurate either. So I know some goths who are Christians or Muslims. I know some that are also Satanists and Wiccans, but it has nothing to do with actually being goth. Again, that's something that's completely up to the individual. It's just like anybody else. Goths are just regular people, basically. Like, that's something that I could say for probably any of these stereotypes. I know how that can be kind of confusing, because in goth culture you'll see a lot of different symbols. You'll see ankhs, like I'm wearing an ankh right now, or you'll see, lots of rosaries or crosses. You'll see pentagrams and pentacles. You'll see a lot of that, and it doesn't always mean that that's what they believe in. The imagery comes from a variety of things. A lot of the reason that some goths like the ankh is, one, it just kind of becomes prevalent in goth culture, so some of it is just that they see other goths wearing it and they also like that imagery. Or it could be because it is the symbol for life or eternal life, so a lot of goths like it for that reason, or because there's a lot of like vampire influence in goth culture, and you'll see it there's the movie The Hunger with David Bowie, there's Bauhaus playing at the beginning with Peter Murphy, and the vampires in the movie, they wear an ankh. So, there's various reasons for why people might use certain imagery, whether it's what they actually believe in or not. At the end of the day, goth is pretty much just a music-based subculture, so it's just enjoying a certain type of music. You don't have to be of any religion to enjoy music. And another stereotype that personally I actually break the mold on is body modifications. I don't have any tattoos. I don't really even have any plans to get any right now. And the only piercings I have as of right now are these ones right here. Just like your regular earlobe piercings. So I do want to get more, but I only want to get ear piercings. I don't plan to get any others. So like the thought that goths are usually heavily tattooed or have piercings or all these crazy things, you know, many people do like that. But again, not all goths. I'm an example of someone who doesn't have any of that. Another one that personally bothers me a lot, because I've had so many people message me and ask me if this is okay, if they can be goth for this reason, or I've seen people full on tell people that they could not be goth for this reason or they weren't goth enough for it, is their skin color. And that's so absurd. There are so many arguments I could make on this, but it has nothing to do with it. Goth is pretty much at the end of the day just enjoying the music. So anyone can do that. It doesn't matter what you look like. So especially your skin color. There have been people of color in goth since the very beginning. Some examples of this are Eddie Branch. He played with Peter Murphy. You can see him in the Cuts You Up music video. He's the bass player. And Andy Anderson, he played in The Cure. He was their drummer for a while. Barry Anderson, he was in Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And even Ray Mondo, who was in Sex Gang Children. So, and there are so many more. Those are just a few from some staple goth bands. But there are so many really great goth bands from all over the place that feature people of every skin color. So, you know, that one is just so extremely harmful. And I hope that that eventually gets eradicated. I don't know that it ever will, but, you know, you don't even have to be a person of color. I have had people comment saying like, oh, don't stay in the sun, make sure you don't ruin your goth complexion, you don't want to be tan. Like, what's so bad if a goth person is tan? That's not something that people can always control, and it's not something that they should have to control. Age is another one that is really annoying. You know, the stereotype that it's a phase or it's only for young people, that's absurd. I am 24 years old, and you know, I've been goth for years now. I know people who are in their 50s who are still goth and have been since the 80s, you know, and they still look goth too. Not that you have to look goth again, but you know, the thought that you shouldn't dress this way anymore or you can't get away with dressing this way if you're older is so stupid. And even if it is a phase, why is that such a big deal? You know, when people are younger, especially when they're in maybe like middle school or high school, people should be able to explore without heavy criticism. You know, people are trying to figure out what they are into and who they are. So, you know, if maybe they dabble in goth and they realize that maybe that's not fully their thing, that should be okay. You know, they shouldn't be made fun of for, oh, that was your goth phase. You know, it should be well respected. Another one that I get a lot of messages on or people asking me about is goth being expensive, and really it's not expensive. It's only expensive if you make it expensive. A lot of people have the assumption now that you have to buy from expensive goth brands to be able to dress goth or look goth enough. And you know, that's not true. You don't have to buy that $70 dress from like Killstar or whatever shop. You know, if you want to, that's awesome. People should be able to splurge every now and then, but that's also not the standard. You know, goth is an offshoot of punk, and it was pretty much born from DIY and secondhand and being accessible for everybody. The outfit that I'm wearing right now, for example, is not really all that expensive or crazy. I didn't buy anything from any fancy shop here. You know, this is just kind of like a regular button down. I've got a Bauhaus shirt from eBay. That wasn't very expensive. The belt I'm wearing is just from the thrift store. It was like $2 or $3. The pants are just plain black skinny jeans. They're Levi's from Levi's website. Levi's are a little more expensive, but you know, they're regular pants. The jewelry, because I think accessorizing is one of the biggest ways that you can immediately make an outfit look more gothic. Most of my jewelry is either from Etsy shops or thrift stores. Right now, like the rings that I'm wearing, they're all from an Etsy shop, or they're from various Etsy shops. I don't remember each one, but I think each ring is $10 or under, max maybe $20. The earrings that I'm wearing, they're from an Etsy shop. I believe they were $20 or under. This choker that I'm wearing, I think it was about $20. The Ankh, I don't remember how much it was. I think it was about $10 to $20 though. You know, jewelry can be more expensive, but it doesn't always have to be expensive jewelry from a nice brand. You know, I also have some thrifted pieces that are really nice. This one is a mustard seed necklace that I got forever ago from the thrift store for 50 cents, and I think it's really cute. You could kind of fit it with any style, really. And again, with just like layering on necklaces, you can immediately change the look of an outfit. It doesn't even have to necessarily be something crazy like this choker here. Another example is this one right here. I thrifted this, and it immediately makes outfits look so much more fancy. I got it at the jewelry section of one of the thrift stores that I shop at, and it's pretty much just like this big chain. It's a couple of like conjoined chains. I bought it originally with the intent to cut it up and kind of sew chain onto things for DIY, but kind of what I do is I just like wrap it up and put it over my head. I'm not going to do it because I've got a mic on and it'll be noisy, but it just looks like I'm wearing a bunch of really fancy necklaces, you know, and it's just a big chain that's wrapped up, and it looks awesome, and it was probably $2 or $3 when I got it. This one is a vest that I got at the thrift store. It was $8, and you know, it looks pretty fancy, but it's just because I bought it and I made it fancy. I added all of these studs, and you can tell that they're not perfect, you know, especially if you look like over in this area, they're not perfect, but no one notices. And you know, it just makes it look more punk or DIY. And then I got some leather paint and I painted on everything else. I painted on these spider webs, this 45 grave, Susie and the Banshees, and Sisters of Mercy on the back. I know my line work is really neat. You don't have to have it be as neat as mine. You know, the more messy it looks, the more punk and DIY it looks anyway. But, you know, it was an $8 vest, and then however much it cost in time, painting, and the studs. Another article of clothing that this one's probably my best thrift find to date, but I get questions on where I find my trench coats all the time. I got this one at the thrift store for $20. You know, it's worth it to look in all sections. I found this hanging on a random rack nowhere near me, and it's like the coolest trench coat ever, and it fits me perfectly. And it was $20, you know? You don't have to buy from expensive goth brands to dress goth. You just have to look at everything with potential. You might think it's ugly in the store, but think about if you can dye it, or if you can cut it up and safety pin it back together, sew it a certain way, if you can paint cool bands onto it, sew patches onto something, and you can make almost anything look absolutely amazing. Another stereotype that I often see parents being worried about is, you know, there's the assumption that goths are on drugs or do drinking or hang out with bad crowds. And I think that that's really just perpetuated by media. You know, you'll see that in movies or things like that. It's always like the goths and the punks that are huge misfits and getting into trouble. And, you know, that's not true either. Again, that's something that's just really up to the individual person. There are normal people that you'll see that maybe are an alcoholic or do some kinds of drugs, but you never know. Me, for example, I hardly ever drink. I drink probably less than once a year, to be honest, and I don't ever smoke or do anything like that. Just because you're goth doesn't mean that you will be pressured to do any of those things, or that the people you see will do any of those things. Another big one that I think is especially harmful is the stereotype that goths are extra kinky or promiscuous in any way, you know, just based on the fact of how we dress. And even, you know, like right now, I'm dressed pretty covered up and I still get tons of comments, and it's so infuriating. You know, I'll have people ask me, oh, can you be my big titty goth girlfriend? Or how do I get a goth girlfriend when they aren't even into goth themselves? Or assuming that I must be extremely kinky or into some super crazy stuff, you know, whatever. I get tons of people like that, and it drives me absolutely insane. It's probably like the #1 most annoying thing that I get in my comments. And the worst part about this is, especially for younger goths, I've had so many minors that message me, and they'll tell me about these guys or just people in general that comment really inappropriate things or ask them awful questions. And, you know, they'll be from like anywhere from 13 to 16 and be questioned about their sexual interests from people that it's none of their business. And most of these assumptions are just because they are goth and the way that they look. You know, they might not even be dressing necessarily like provocative or anything like that. But, you know, like Susie Sue, for example, like I mentioned before, she's an inspiration for many goths. And one of the things that you would see in a lot of her outfits were fishnets. So, you know, it's not necessarily that fishnets are inherently like a sexual thing to wear, but just something that goths have adopted over the years. And younger goths, it's not wrong for them to dress however they feel comfortable, but a lot of people will see stuff like that and assume because they are maybe wearing fishnets or dress any type of way that they must be pretty promiscuous. And it's so disgusting that we have to deal with that. But goth is highly fetishized, and hopefully that eventually ends soon. This one's not really a stereotype, but I would say more so just like a confusion about goth. And that is what goths listen to, what the difference is between goth and emo, or even sometimes metalheads, because a lot of people just don't know what the difference is. You know, a lot of people see goths and they think they must listen to some really heavy music. You know, they probably listen to something like, in what their head, they probably hear something like death metal or anything like that. And, you know, I mean, some goths do like metal. I'm also a metalhead as well as a goth, so I enjoy a lot of metal music, but it doesn't have anything to do with goth. You know, if I look like this, I'm probably listening to The Cure or Corpus Delicti, Susie and the Banshees, or Bauhaus, something like that. Not Morbid Angel or Slayer. So, you know, some goths do like metal, but that's not what goths typically listen to. And then there's the whole emo and goth thing. A lot of people just think that those are the same thing, and they're not. They are very different scenes. Goth originated more in the late 70s, early 80s. It was an offshoot of punk, a lot like emo was, but goth originated from like more of an early 70s punk sound and evolved into post-punk and goth rock. So it's got a more melancholic sound to it. It's usually more bass-driven, kind of more slow and lower register vocals a lot of the time. But emo music is a little bit newer than goth is. It originated more in the 90s, and even though it is also an offshoot of punk, it's more so derived from stuff like hardcore punk instead of the 70s punk sound like goth is. So it kind of has more elements like pop punk and even like kind of screamo for some people. Like some examples of bands that a lot of emo people I know listen to would be Fall Out Boy, Green Day, Blink-182, Paramore, things like that. And they've got a completely different sound. It sounds a little bit more upbeat. The lyrical content is very different in it usually. They even dress a little bit different. Goth is still, I think, a little bit closer to the 80s aesthetic than emo is. Teased hair is another sign of kind of goth fashion, or the kind of makeup style that I'm wearing. Goths tend to do more intricate makeup a lot of the time, more so just like bigger hair. Emo can have bigger hair, but it's a little bit of a different style, you know. You'll see kind of like the striped hair, maybe more colors than some goths would wear. Like beanies seems to be something that like a lot of emo people like to dress in. You'll see like a lot of different things between the two. I'm not emo myself, so I don't think I can really talk as much on it because I don't want to get things wrong. But they're both derived from different sounds. They kind of come from different times, so they've got very different influences for both of them. And then, you know, many goths do also enjoy other genres. So there are goths that do like emo music, there are goths that do like metal music, goths can even like pop music, you know. You're not limited to just one genre. You cannot, like, just because you're goth doesn't mean you can only ever listen to goth music, no other genres. You know, you can enjoy other things. I am goth, but I also am a metalhead. I love a lot of metal music, and I love a lot of punk music. I like some pop music. I like a little bit of rap. I like some classical. You know, I'm a little bit all over the place, and many other goths are too. It just so happens that goth is usually our main genre or our main influence. Hopefully that kind of helped with, you know, some of the stereotypes that surround goth and breaking down some of those. If I missed any that you want me to cover, definitely feel free to talk about them in the comments, and, you know, if there's enough, I could always make another video on this. But I think I covered a lot of the things that are harmful to goths or major points of confusion.